Squid Game guy in charge of Ofsted. You've got Baroness Farsi in charge of Justice. You've got Sadiq Khan in charge of London. You've got Mohammedans everywhere.
Liberals are still defending it. We were pointing out that
we need to be
running the education system, and everyone's like, "Oh, yeah, but isn't it so diverse?" Even people who think they're on our side.
Welcome to another episode of Fox and Father with me, the Fox, and him,
the Father.
It's a show where Calvin tries to tutor me in the ways of righteousness and succeeds. But, on recent form, it's Calvin who needs tutoring in the ways of righteousness. And, I'm sanctified and holy and wonderful and amazing. So
I had some chaps around for a smoke in my 3-season room. We have pipes at St. Paul's, and one of them was saying he saw you on WTF with Larry Taunton, and you gave a definition of the Christian faith that apparently was just spot on. And one of my friends here was saying that Laurence gets it. He gets Christianity. I was like, okay, cool.
Oh, wow. What was that? I must remember what that was. All this crap that comes out of my mouth half the time. Who knows? But on that point, I do think, before we get on to how are you, because I want to hear about how are you, I do think that the truth is very simple. And if you have to obfuscate a lot, or you have to over-explain something, it's probably not true. That's just what I would. That's what I would say. Anyway, how are you, brother?
I'm okay. How are you?
How's the last supper? Are you at the last supper? I mean, what's happening? How was church today?
I absolutely loved it, by the way. This was bought for me when I first got here by one of my parishioners. It's gorgeous. We were going to put it up in the studio in the church. But things have been happening in the church. So I'm in my living room at the moment in the rectory. So I've put it up on the wall here so I can still do shows from here. I was in church this morning. It's Sunday. I said a private mass beforehand because I can still say mass as a priest, but I can't say a public mass yet at the moment because I don't have my faculties, my license. That's hard. That is really hard. So I sit at the back of church during mass, sit with the choir, sing with the choir. It's interesting because I get to see church from a different perspective, but it's very hard. My mum was saying to me, it's like, because my mum's a teacher and I used to be a teacher. She says, it's like being in your classroom. A substitute teacher is taking the lesson and you have to sit at the back and watch. That's pretty much what it's like. But it is a lesson in humility. It really is. I'm going through something right now.
I always admire you for your ability to turn it into something which is necessary rather than something which is enjoyable. Because often, like we were talking about, we've spoken a lot about suffering. It's kind of often, if you can embrace it a bit, it becomes a bit easier to deal with than constantly resisting suffering and going, oh, why is it so painful? Everything's so difficult. It's so hard all the time. I'm like, welcome to breathing 24 hours a day.
Like,
it's hard for everyone. So, how am I? I am all right. I'm a week into my social media sabbatical.
Yeah. How's that going? It's weird not seeing you pop up.
I can't tell you, man. It's pretty good. It is good as I thought it would be.
Yeah, I think even inspired my mum. I was on the phone to her. She said, I'm going to do that as well because it's just toxic. Every time you open Twitter, it's toxic.
Yeah, if I genuinely thought anything I had to say would change anything in the short term, and it was there was a global crisis and, someone suddenly cared about Laurence Fox's addition to the conversation, fine. But I know this to be true, that it's nothing's going to happen except it's slowly going to get worse. So, and people send me things. So, Alison Pearson sent me today about, we got that they're going to decolonize the curriculum, go to Shakespeare because he was white and stuff. And she's like, you're an actor. You've got to.
Look, we've talked about this. We've talked about it on the show. We've done it.
Exactly. And it's like, and she's like, you've got to say something. And I'm like, I'm not saying anything. I'm not, it's going to get worse until the institutions are reclaimed, recaptured. But I have to say that it's very interesting the effect social media has on you because it's low level anxiety generally. And because I tweet quite hardcore stuff. You know, I'm not. So, you know, you do too. You're a bit more sober and judicious than I am.
I try, but not always. Yeah,
mine. Yeah. Well, exactly. When you're not as sober and judicious as you are, usually it's pretty hardcore. But I'm always looking to go to punch the argument in the face because I hate it so much. And so what would happen is some days, like if you'd had a long lunch or something, and you go outside for a cigarette after, you know, 2 bottles of red wine, and something pops up and you're like, I'm not having any of that. You know?
Well, I've never understood how you do this. You have a capacity that I've never seen elsewhere. Like, if I'm going to tweet about something, I have to observe it. I have to get into it. It takes me a while to follow and find out. And then I put together a tweet. Like, I'm sat with you at lunch. You're having your salmon and a glass of wine. And then you pop outside for fun. You come back in, and there's this Twitter storm going off because you've done in those 30 seconds, you've somehow observed the whole topic, put out a tweet, and peed off half the world. I'm like, I don't even know how you squeeze it in.
Well, I think it goes back to what we were saying at the beginning, which is it's simple. The truth is simple. And so therefore, objective truth is the most important thing in the world. And, you know, one of the things we all lack is objectivity in a lot of ways. So we have to ask God for objectivity. And God gives us it. And it can be painful and hard a lot of the time, but it is objective. So if you just apply those simple rules, then you can spot bollocks from a mile off. You know what I mean? It's so easy to spot. So what's happened is I wake up in the morning now, and I go, oh God, what did I say yesterday? Oh, nothing.
Yeah.
And then people send me stuff, and, you know, and I what I've started to do is politely respond to them by saying I'm not on social media. So, especially with the reform stuff, I'd no idea where the reform stuff is this week. Don't care. Couldn't give monkeys really.
Same as last week.
I've written this article. What do you think of it? And I'm like, I just say, so sorry to not engage with it. It's just, I'm taking a bit of a sabbatical. So I wake up and I go, I didn't say anything. And then you get into a slightly weird part of the world, which is you then start to feel like a liar because it's not like you didn't think it. You just didn't say it. And so it's quite interesting. I would highly recommend, I think, everybody have a grasp on their interactions with social media. And I mean, if I could go back and do it all again, I would have 2 social media accounts. I'd have public Laurence, who walked off Question Time and made the points that I continue to make in a very direct and, you know, palatable way in the Nigel Farage or the British view that all elections are won from the centre. And then I'd have a Burnside account where I just sort of trolled the world.
Who is Burnside?
I know Burnside quite well. I'm not telling anyone here. I go out to lunch with Burnside. I can tell you one thing about Burnside. He's a very, very high net worth individual.
Oh. I find him hilarious. His Twitter account is one of the best because it's consistent. Like, he's always funny and always on point.
Yeah, he's absolutely brilliant. So I thought we'd do something different this week because, you know, we're not going to talk about Nige.
Well, before we get to those, we've got plenty to talk about first. So your wedding, for instance.
Oh God, yes. Wait, oh my God, you're so right. Okay, let's tell the story of the wedding. Or shall I tell the story of the wedding?
Yeah, it's your story.
Okay. Let me read to you an email from one of the acolytes of Henry VIII's divorce court.
Whilst Laurence finds that, I was driving in the car back from the seaside the other day after church, having a nice, relaxing time. And he says, oh, you've been cancelled again, pretty much. This time it's my wedding. So,
yeah,
you got
this is brilliant. Yeah. Dear Laurence and dear Elizabeth and Laurence. God, so she's already messing up with the whole idea. You know, crikey. I hope this finds you both well and the plans are coming together for the wedding. I've been praying for you both. Thank you. Firstly, thank you very much for returning your form and dropping in the hard copy. That's really helpful. I'll put together a running order of your service with declarations, vows, etc., so you can proceed with printing. I'll have that to you next week. At our meeting, we talked about your friend, Father Calvin Robinson, preaching and offering prayers in your wedding service. And I said I'd ask my bishop. I've done so, but the bishop has instructed me this won't be possible. And that any speeches or prayers would need to be a private matter at the reception, not part of a Church of England service. I know you'll be disappointed about this, but I hope that we'll be able to work together to give you the blah, 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 blah. So I respond with the typical Fox response. Dear Joe, we appreciate your prayers and hope that God blesses both the bishop and yourself with the forgiveness which defines Christianity. We were both very keen to get married in church, despite my correctly held, it turns out, reservations that the Church of England exists in service of the other bloke these days. You know, the one with the horns. As both Lizzie and I are Christians, we believe that cancel culture is profoundly wrong. We are both keen to be married in the presence of God by a practicing Christian surrounded by those who we genuinely love and who love us in return. We will sadly, therefore, have to decline the use of your church, the church that you are the current custodian of, on religious grounds. It's a real shame that this is the case, but neither of us would feel comfortable setting foot in your church. It's also such a shame now that all the invitations have gone out that we will have to inform people of this change and reasons for it. So gracious of the bishop to wait over a month to get back to us. We're both sincerely moved by his thoughtfulness. Perhaps in time, church will put politics aside and get back to biblical teaching. An added bonus of this strategy might be that some Christians could return and you won't be run off your feet having to dash between 4 empty churches that you're currently allocated to minister to. Godspeed, Laurence Fox.
Cutting, absolutely cutting.
Yeah.
Well,
so, it's fuck off. Sorry, but it's like, I've looked into this, by the way, as well. Mm. If I wanted like George Clooney, I could have George Clooney.
Yeah.
You know? So it's
whether I have a license at the moment, whether I have my faculties or not, makes no difference. Whether I'm a priest or not makes no difference. It's entirely at their discretion. The fact that it took her bishop a month to get back to you means they were probably trying to find a way to say no. And the fact that I've had this controversy over here gives them a reason to say no.
Well, she mentions that in the response. So she says that, you've had this terrible controversy where you did nothing wrong again and got punished for it. And I just, with people like that, I just don't even want to bother explaining to them. So the good news is that I gave her the 2 fingers because that's what I do with these people. I don't think these people are Christians. I think they live in service of the devil. I think the Church of England is Henry VIII's divorce court. I don't think it was even created with God in mind. I think Henry VIII, who was, by all accounts, very devout when he was a young man, stopped worshipping God and started worshipping his own dick. And a load of women got their heads cut off as a result of it. And then old blue-haired, I kept myself so reserved in that meeting as well when I walked in to meet the vicar, who was, I think purple would be a better description. Yeah, and covered in tats.
Oh, my goodness.
And
not to judge a book by its cover, but there's a certain sense of decency, right?
Yeah. You're never going to go and say, like, my mum's just died, I'm trying to plan a funeral, and it's like, you're talking to a purple-headed woman. Anyway, bless her, she's trying to be inclusive. And I understand the problem of inclusion, which is you've got to include everyone, which also means you have to you've got to include everyone except the people that you need to actually include. Mm-hmm. And so I just kind of thought the good news. So Lizzie and I actually did have I'm letting everyone into our private life. I don't care. It's fine. We're not allowed to talk about politics. So Lizzie was much more upset than I was. Well, she was like, it's really important. We've got to get married in front of God. And I said, babe, calm down. That bit is a signing a form. We'll do the ceremony, will be exactly the same because we want, you're going to bless us and all of this sort of stuff. But that bit is just signing a form. You can hire a registrar to do that. And so we had a little kind of back and forth for about, for an evening. And then the next day she was like, oh yeah, no, I get it now. So now we have to pay $7.50 plus VAT for a registrar to pop up on the day. So who's making it? So it's 25 quid if you get married in a church for the person to officiate, sign the legal form. You're off. You're married. Now I'm giving some socialist wanker best part of £1,000.
But I'm going to give you a beautiful blessing. Rather than just a little sermon, I'm going to give you a beautiful blessing. It's going to be the best wedding in the country.
I loved it. It was so good. You were like, what sort of wedding do you want? And I'm like, trad. And you're like, good. I'll send you some trad stuff over. There weren't enough these and thous in it, but we can work on that. We could add some. Anyway. Yeah. So screw the Church of England. And also, Lizzie's been going to church. She's been going, and I'm just like, there are a few sound churches, Emma and Alex go to a sound church. There are some sound churches in London, and we were lucky enough to, see some, but overall, you're just like, what do you hate your own congregation. It's like Britain. It's like you hate British people. So let's get rid of Shakespeare.
Emma and Alex go to my old church. I'm going to give them a shout out. St. Mary Brookfield is where I learned everything I know. I'm sure they'll appreciate the shout out on Fox and Fr.
Who doesn't? So there are some sound churches. So anyway, in the end, we're now going to, weather permitting, there's a beautiful wooden glade in it. Unfortunately, the whole thing is in one little area. So the church is, just part of it. So, it doesn't really affect anything, but it's going
to be gorgeous.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing. So that was that. But I was just like, you people, I've no respect for any of these people.
Well, I felt bad because I was like, I don't want to be ruining your wedding. I'll come and sit in the pews at the back. I don't need to speak.
I know you would.
Privileged to be there.
But I asked you to do that, and I want you to do that, and we both want you to do that, and actually, in times of difficulty and, in times where people's minds are wandering between truth and lies, you actually need to hold on to all of the things that actually matter. No. I don't want to follow some, just because it says Church of England on it or, licensed whatever on it. I don't want to follow that person down the alleyway of going, we've got to include trans female bishops, I don't want it. I don't want to be part of it. Right. I find it satanic. I think it's wrong. I think it's evil. And so do you. And you're persecuted. You've been persecuted since day one. I remember you sending me the recording of you and, what's her name? Malali. And listening to these people talking about like, really patronizing way of kind of trying to say like, maybe Calvin, you're just a bit, maybe you could be a bit more of like a lying, thieving bastard. We'd let you in. and you're like, yeah. Could you give me a biblical example of where that's true? Wow. Anyway, so the wedding. So there we are. We get blessed by you with our great, thing. And we get to hear you speak to us because we care about you, because that's what fellowship is. And fellowship is the most important thing in the world. And
because this is something I tried to say to a friend of ours. Like, when you're getting married, it's not a private event. It's not between you and the couple. It's you and the couple coming together as one, as part of the community. So it's the people that you love, that will hold you to account, that will support you in times of need. It's like, it's not a one-off thing. It's part of a greater journey. And so popping into your random purple-haired C of E priestess means nothing. But getting blessed in front of people that you genuinely care about and are in a community with, that's more important.
I think it is more important. And I think it means that I also think that, there's God is everywhere all the time. And, he's looking down on us at the moment going, oh, you guys you do test my patience. But, I genuinely believe in the power of prayer. So I believe in the power of prayer, and therefore I believe in the power of, I think we both do, Lizzie and I both do, that we need to be in communion with God. Needs to be there. And I don't think God's in that church. I think there's a lot of little toys and kids running around at the back of service because parents are like, well, I don't want to be a Muslim, so I'll be a Christian or whatever. People who go to these churches, but she runs 4, and this is not a small area.
Not being cynical, but it's often because the better schools in the area are CV schools, and so they want to get into those schools, so they have to go to church. In these middle class areas.
This is not that middle class. It's just this. This is not a particularly middle class area. It's actually, no, it's not. It's a mix. But there's 4 churches around, and no one goes to any of them. So it's like, you know,
I was
all
thinking
these
the other
ancient
day,
buildings.
there are very few churches in England that I would go to, that I'd feel comfortable going to, that I know they have sound doctrine. And I can count on one hand the number of priests that I would trust. You know, I'd go and sit in their church and hear their sermons. And one of those people is Canon Father Phil Harris, who's going through it.
Love you, Canon Father Phil. Of course,
such a good guy, right? Such a homeless guy, very moderate, but based, you know, conservative, traditional Christian. He's helped a lot of people, including myself.
He's helped me personally. He's checked in on me. He's looked after me. He's ministered to me. He's a fucking legend. He's my Fox and Fr follows. He'd hate me to swear and say that, but I'm going to say it to him anyway. And our Fox and Fr follows, just while I'm at it, I didn't delete the app because I was worried that I'd lose it, but I just want to get his, I didn't want to, cause, what's her name? Bernie lost hers.
Yeah.
Where's Phil? Right. Okay. So my Fox and Fr follows is at Phil HS10. So it's at capital P HIL capital HS 10. Reverend Canon Father Phil Harris. How is he doing? You allowed to tell us some stuff? Or
yes. No? He got back to his church from his trip to America, where he was doing some work with bishops, got back and he'd been locked out of church. He's been cancelled. The Charity Commission launched investigations into him, into every single charity he's on the board of. So it's clearly an attack from somewhere high up in the UK establishment. And the trustees on the charity that own the church, you know, buckled under pressure, as people often do. I'm not saying they're not good people, but they're just weak people and they've locked him out and cancelled him from his church. And so he had to find another place to go and say mass in. Thankfully, the majority of his congregation joined him because they're a church together. A church is a community of people. It's not a building. And so they went and they had church, they did church, but he's been persecuted. And I think one of the reasons is that he spoke at one of our rallies, one of the Uniting the Kingdom rallies. In fact, I think he was at 2 of them now. And they're trying to, is guilt by association. Oh, he's there with Laurence Fox, Calvin Robinson, Tommy Robinson. Oh my gosh, Voldemort himself. Now, Canon Phil's been very, very careful not to support any of us politically, including Tommy, but he is always there for people spiritually. And I think that's what a priest should be like. He's also a prime example of a good priest.
What did Jesus do again?
Sorry. Well, indeed.
How did Jesus make his way in the world? Oh, yes, that's right. He hung around with the tax collectors and the debt collectors and the prostitutes. You know, not to say that you or I are a prostitute of any kind, but to say that, you know, that there was a very clear message, even to a secular person, there's a very clear message in that. I mean, what a disaster. Anyway, let's not ruminate on the negativity of stuff because I don't feel particularly negative. I've also, by the way, my book proposal goes in this week.
Oh, great.
And I got sent it today.
How are you feeling about that?
I read it because I haven't read it for, you know, I just write, I don't read.
Yeah.
And it made me chuckle.
Okay, good.
So I laughed at, I laughed for myself. So yeah, that's going through and I didn't realize.
Looking at your phone.
Well, no, I'm just looking at it because I want to get the questions.
We'll get to the questions. We're having a chat, Laurence.
Shut up.
Fox and Fr is what we do. Right. So yesterday I got back from New York. My first trip to New York.
Yeah, you were on the East Coast, right? Yes.
Yeah. Have you been to New York? I assume you have.
I have. I went to New York as a child and I then went to New York as an adult. And, as a child, it was quite magnificent when I was young. And then as an adult, it wasn't fun because it was just a den of debauchery and I didn't enjoy any of it. And I never, you know, we spent most of our time just partying and it was no fun.
Right.
So, tell me.
Well, I went to speak at a UN event. There's a UN event on women. But of course, the UN is full of globalists and wokists. But I was invited by the Coalition for Life to speak on life, the sanctity of life. And it was actually really powerful because lots of good people turned up. And I was expecting hecklers, but no one heckled. So, you know, you don't know who's in the room when you're saying these things. So it could be, you know, some people that haven't heard the story of how of the importance of life and how we're made in the image of God and how every single human life should be protected from conception to natural death. So it's important that we have these conversations. But I also went to a number of other speakers and things throughout the time at the UN. And the UN is a empty, soulless place. It's godless, although they do have their own chapel there, which I found interesting. They call it a meditation room, which it looks like a Christian chapel with an altar in the middle, but there's no cross, there's no Christ, and there's room on the floor to move the chairs if you want to get your rugs out and put your bum in the air. But it's just, you can imagine what the intention is. But I stood in the lobby of the UN, and I was convicted to pray the rosary. I stood there praying the rosary out loud, and I assumed that I might get kicked out or heckled, but people were smiling, people coming up to me. So as I was praying, I didn't pause praying, but I continued praying, and I handed out free rosaries to people who came up to me. And there was genuine joy on people's faces. This is actually, it took me by surprise. I'm not very often surprised, but I really felt that was a heartwarming moment. But New York has to be the worst place I've ever visited.
Really? Why?
I felt claustrophobic, stifled, like you can't breathe because all you can smell is skunk everywhere. You can't see the sky because it's just these great big monstrous brutalist buildings. There's no connection with humanity. There's no connection with divinity. There's no nature. There's no God's creation. It's just all man everywhere, man's creation. It's just a testament to the worship of man. I find it ugly, very, very ugly. Just concrete, grey, and smelly. I mean, it's the people great. I had lots of good conversations, but I don't know how they could survive in an environment like that.
Yeah, I kind of bought the lie that sort of, it's not a Bauhaus lie, but it's a lie to think that, the skyscrapers were reaching to heaven, but actually cathedrals were reaching to heaven in times when people really didn't have they had enough geometry and algebra to work out, but they overcompensated, and you end up with Chartres Cathedral and Notre Dame, and that one in San Sebastian, is it called? I can't remember the one in Barcelona, but it's, you end up with these amazing edifices to God, actually worship to God. Whereas, like you say, these slabs of, iron and glass are more, they're like knives in the sky, aren't they? They're kind of, they're strange, and you do feel disembodied. You don't feel connected to the land, which no doubt, there'll be various New York congressmen and probably women, or probably much more likely women, who say that you're living on stolen land anyway. So it's that very sort of, it's that very lost, human-centric way of looking at the world, isn't it? I suppose is what you're describing, and it's hopeless, and that's what I find about that sort of thing. It's hopeless, but you find hope in it, so you had good conversations.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you know what? It taught me a thing or two about driving as well. So I was driving a Tesla down there, and I didn't realize you can't really drive in New York at all. But they don't indicate; they just stick their nose out and go. Like, they don't communicate in a proper way. They just honk. Everyone's honking their horn. It's like being like third world country at a time. Different places drive in different ways. It taught me a thing or two. I'll tell you that. But no, it was an experience.
And then but that's good though that you haven't been cancelled from that. That's nice.
Oh, but while I was there with the group,
I got cancelled from this. What?
So the Coalition for Life that I was with are also running the Canadian March for Life, which I've been invited to and I'm very excited about. But there's a horrible group called antihate.ca. They're basically like hope not hate. These groups that pretend they're against hate, but actually all they do is spend their time hating. And they put these brochures together of, me and you were in the hope not hate brochure of worst people in Britain or something.
Good.
Right. And antihate.ca, in the Canadian ones, they hate the group that are running March for Life, but they also, of course, hate me because they hate the pro-life argument. And so they sent an email to me, just a really nice email. I just replied, I don't give comment to extremist far left organizations. But then they also tried to get me cancelled from the event by complaining to the venue. Look, this group is inviting a Nazi along, trying to cancel the March for Life. Now, fortunately, the March for Life team are very solid and they didn't back down. They doubled down. And the venue, thank God, was also solid and said, this is obviously ridiculous. This guy's not a Nazi. What are you doing? Stupid. But it quite easily could have been another cancellation. It's just like, this is how these horrible people are.
Do you think that there's I sense, and I wonder if I sense this because I'm off it and I'm not involved in it at the moment. I really sense a change I think that there's frustration in the air about all of this. Certainly the cancelling. I think, if you were to, break down the problems that we have in this world, that aren't, economic, societal, that those, the sort of day to day, can I put food on my plate problems, but you break down the broader philosophical problems with life. I think that you would deal with cancel culture pretty quickly. You'd say, we're not doing that anymore. Sorry. We're not in the McCarthy era. We're not going to put up with it anymore. So, I'm glad that they kept their thing. And I also think that you, not wavering from the path that you have been put on is only going to reap more suffering, but in a good way.
I agree.
Well,
that was 2 days ago. Yesterday, I spent 8 hours down the gun range, doing my concealed pistol license training. Yeah.
Do you get your license if you've got a license?
Hopefully, we'll see. We'll see if the state of Michigan.
I just need a holster here and a holster there. Have you seen Training Day with Denzel?
Yeah, of course I've seen Training Day.
Do you know when they find that the guy is raping
King Kong ain't got on me?
And he gets the guns out and he starts hitting them together and he's got 2 of them. And then he gets them together as 2 handles and he smacks the sexual abuser and the nads. And I just think, Denzel's, he's a fascinating
I love Denzel. Yeah. One of my favorite.
He's the greatest actor. I need to oh my God. Yeah. So I saw, and this is how bad it really is. We saw, I was listening to Megyn Kelly mocking, the Oscars. And one of the films, either she was talking about to do the Oscars or something else, is called The Substance, right? So I'm like, okay, it sounds like that film with Bradley Cooper in it, where he takes the pill and he becomes really clever.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember that film?
Yes, I do.
Whatever it was called, Infinite or whatever it was called.
Yeah.
And anyway, The Substance is about the most gratuitously disgusting film ever made.
Oh.
So it's about an old lady or an older lady, Demi Moore, who is able to take a substance.
Is Demi Moore an older lady now?
She's an older lady now.
Oh, yeah. Scare me. Wow.
And she takes a substance, and what happens is she's fired from her job because she's like a TV fitness person, and she's fired from her job because she's too old. So she has this substance and she takes it, and a younger version of herself comes out of her body, and the younger person. So she kind of gives birth to a younger version of herself, and they have to swap every 7 days, or one of them gets sick and ill. And obviously the younger version destroys the older version. And it's a terrible. I mean, the concept of the movie is actually quite interesting, but it is so awfully done and dreadful. So I thought, that's show business switched off for a while. So I can highly recommend, I actually would recommend people go and watch it, because it's just like, if you want to see the degeneracy of the world, go and watch that, because it is beyond degenerate. And the way that it hates, it's so like all the things that we talk about. It's so the thing, they are the exact thing they accuse you of. It's the most misogynistic. We watched it for about 15 minutes, and I said to Lizzie that this is made by gays. And she went, "Why do you say that?" I said, "Well, look at how they depict women. It's all like, it's like, and it's like, that's, yeah, it's not what actual men fall in love with in women. But you can see why certain sections of the same-sex attracted community like, to wear puppy masks and gimp suits. That's what I sort of got. It's a lot of rubber. Put it that way.
Do we get to some of the questions?
Yeah, no, you want to shut me up at some point. Right. So on this week's episode of Fox and Father, because we can't talk about politics, because we are banned. Well, I am banned. So Louise Brislane, 6607, over the past week, I have been hearing via YouTube that there is a rise in young people. Sorry, let me just get this right. Lacey, our delightful producer, who is she's desperately trying to keep up with the we're not allowed to talk about politics thing and give us other ideas to talk about. Lacey's put out there, guys, what would you like to talk about? So, Louise Brislane 6607. Over the past week, I've been hearing via YouTube that there is a rise in young people in Great Britain seeking Christianity. What are you seeing on the ground? Well,
you're the one in Great Britain.
I'm the one in Great Britain. Well, not that much. So I saw an empty church. I know that more Bibles were sold last year than have ever been sold. That I do know.
That's so cool.
In a single year. And yes, anecdotally, I know that, a lot more people turn to Christ on a personal level. I don't think this has got to do with, Christianity particularly, but when I go and watch my, son play football, instead of what it was a few years ago when I used to go turn up at school, it was a bit like, whoa, now it's all right, Lars. So I think people are sort of slightly coming around to the idea that things may not be as good as, the progressives say it is. So I would say that I think there is, I also think that, as we both have always thought and said repeatedly, and I'd be interested to hear what you think about this, that, there is no other way of defeating this but through Christ. You can't defeat it.
So
without.
No, I absolutely agree with that. I've been contemplating on this. I think that the boomers clearly messed things up. Gen X doubled down, went for woke, went for liberalism, went for DEI in order to fix things. My generation, the millennials, have been apathetic. And for the latter, and kept things going the way they were, unfortunately. But for the latter part, started to wake up. Generation Z, I really think, are the ones who are going to fix things through Christ. They are the ones who are seeing that, the world has gone to pot, and they're looking at previous generations and thinking we can't do what they did. We've got to come up with a better solution. And I honestly think that they are the generation that are returning to church, returning to traditional Christian values, and just bringing back common sense. It will be the Generation Z that help bring Western society back to civilization. I know I'm massively generalizing here, but I do think that when I see the rad trads and the kind of the people who are taking the faith seriously, it is Generation Z.
Well, it's also, even if you sort of put Christianity aside for a second, that there is, in every human heart, there is a need for hope and, and for optimism and all of that.
Right.
So this constant navel-gazing self-hatred that has been going on for too long will have to come to an end anyway, because no one wants to be that miserable all the time, do they? Particularly. Right. I mean, I don't. I a week off social media, which also gives you the weirdest thing about a week off social media is it gives you the value of propaganda. So you think, okay, I'm going to become the very people I'm trying to convince. Uninformed, not interested, not plugged in, don't care. I'm going to become that person. And what is going to seep into my head? And the only things that have seeped into my head this week are Trump is really bad and Keir Starmer is amazing.
Oh.
And that was from one moment walking past a shop, walking into a shop and then having Sky News on in the background.
Yeah.
And it was like, Donald Trump is very bad and everything's awful. And then, but Keir Starmer is amazing. And look at Keir Starmer. And I was like, I looked up at this TV screen and I thought, okay, well, this is what the punters are seeing. So so the value of propaganda is very, very good. It's, just pump you full of Trump bad, orange man bad, orange man bad, orange man bad. Keir Starmer, warmongering, socialist, lunatic. Great. So it's like, okay. But again, as I pointed out to you at the beginning, it makes no difference because in 3 months' time, when I pop back on in June, it'll all be exactly the same.
Yep.
But I will have just gone, I would have had holiday. Right, next question. Oh, I can't even pronounce that. QIA Kirjane, is that a diverse name?
I don't know. Qiajenae. It looks like
Qiajenae Hamilton.
Hamilton.
Favorite biblical scriptures and why? Although I would like Laurence to read the entire books in the Bible, so he understands our salvation in Jesus Christ more clearly. Hugs you both. By the way, Jeremiah 31:33 is one of mine, but I have 3 real faves. Okay. Calvin, favorite biblical scripture. And I am going to look at my phone while I find mine because I'm going to, I like.
Well, I know your favorite Psalm is 139.
It is. And I'm going to read a bit of it.
My favorite bit of scripture changes depending on where I am, what I'm doing, who I'm with. But at the moment, it is be still and know that I'm God. Because that's what I'm trying to live through right now as I'm in this limbo period. Plus, in Lent, I'm doing a jigsaw puzzle. I can't remember the last time I did something recreational, right? That's not either politics or church. And so I'm just I go to my local Catholic coffee shop and I read a chapter of my book every day. And I have a different conversation with a different person in that coffee shop every day. And I'm seeing good fruits from being still and trying to listen to the Lord. I spend time in the church, just in the pews and just in prayer. So I'm doing less busy time and following that scripture seriously.
Be still and know that I am God. I mean, be still and know I am God. 7 words. Yeah. You often don't need more than 7 words to make any point. I was speaking to someone this morning and I realized that I once made more money than I've ever made from saying 9 words.
Wow.
3 in a morning, 3 of them for Allianz Insurance. I can't remember, but it was something like Allianz for all of us or something like that. And then BMW was like BMW, the thing of the thing, whatever it was. But I made a shit ton of money doing that. Anyway, here you go. I'm going to give him, Psalm 139. It's so good. You have searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely. You hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me. Your right hand will hold me fast. Is that you or me?
That's me. Sorry.
So no, that's fine. So that was it. It happened right at the end, which is good. And then there's the very end of it is this, which I love Psalms because they tend to sort of start off kind of like, yeah, man, you're amazing. And then by the end of the Psalms, it's like, I want to kill someone.
They're very real. There's a psalm for everything, for every mood. There's a psalm. They're fantastic.
If only you, God, would slay the wicked away from me. You who are bloodthirsty, they speak of you with evil intent. Your adversaries misuse your name. Do I not hate those who hate you, Lord, and abhor those who are in rebellion against you? I have nothing but hatred for them. I count them my enemies. Search me, God, know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me and lead me to the way everlasting. See, this is what the Christians need to get a fucking grip on. Is it says, next time, so I'd forgotten that bit. Next time I get a turn the other cheeker, wokist, I'm going to say, that.
Yeah, quite right.
I'm going to say that. But also what I love about Psalms is it'll say something like kill them, get rid of them, they're your enemies. And then at the end it'll go, but also search me and know if I'm being a bad person or not, which is quite good, which we want to weigh up. So there we go.
So there are Psalms that we call them the imprecatory Psalms that call for God's wrath in situations and on people. And the places like, the Church of England shy away from these, but it's scripture, it's inerrant, it's God-breathed, and so it is part of our prayer life, and modern wet liberal Christians don't want to embrace it. But I advise people to look up the imprecatory Psalms, particularly 35, 69, and 109. But
okay,
our friend Denningpole memorized all Psalms, didn't he? I think that's a beautiful thing to do.
Yeah, he did. He started off with Psalm 91, and I haven't heard from Denningpole in a very long time, actually. So I haven't listened to his podcast either, which I often really liked.
Who's it with now? He and Toby Young split, didn't they? Lord Toby, yeah.
Yeah, I think Lord Toby Young and James Denning-Pole did split. Yes, they. I still have it on my phone. It makes me a bit sad. I've still got that last step where James just went, "I can't be off with you, mate."
I said it all along, actually, all those years ago, that Toby Young wanted to become a peer, and this is why he does and says everything he says. He's a good man, but his ambition was to become a peer, and it paid off. So he played the game well.
Well, I think a lot of people want to become peers. It's just so low on my list of things that I want to become ever. In fact, I take it as I would take it. Well, you were
on the track. If you'd have continued, if you'd have been silent and not gone on Question Time, you would have been knighted by now.
No, I wouldn't, because, the Foxes, my Uncle Eddie, I think he's got one at 90, whatever he is, 88. I think my Uncle Eddie has got a knighthood now, or one of the gongs. But who wants to share an award that Sadiq Khan's got at the end of the day? Right. Robert Farrell. How did you two meet? Any funny experiences? What, if any, sports and or hobbies are you interested in? What period of history are you interested in? That's interesting. That's a good question. You go first. How did we meet, Calv?
You called me up and said, I'm sick of this acting stuff. I'm being cancelled. I'm going to set up a new party. I've seen your content. You're all right. What do you think I should do? Pretty much.
And then I ignored every piece of advice you gave me. Do you remember?
Yeah.
You were like, okay, I'm going to set up a group of serious thinkers.
Yeah.
And we're going to speak.
Like, look, you need a policy team. You need a ground team. You've got to get canvassing. And you're like, yeah, okay.
No, I'd rather just throw hand grenades at people, so it turned out. That's how we met. What, any funny experiences? We've had so many funny experiences, but our funny experiences are quite, my funniest experiences with Calv are actually when we both are just sat there silently and then something happens and we both just go, which often happens in Skiathos.
It's funny because online we are the drama, but in real life we're kind of just observing the drama most of the time.
We are. Oh, my favorite one was was Big Brother Tom, when Big Brother Tom does make us laugh, but then he goes for everyone, doesn't he? So that was quite funny.
One of my favorite ones was when someone kicked off because I don't know how much I can say. You had to give your phone over for one of your many court cases for disclosure. And you had to let us all know. I was like, yeah, sure, whatever I've said, I stand by what I said. But some people were not keen on letting the law know what they've said in our group chats, and someone kicked off like I've never seen before. That was hilarious.
That was a very indicative moment for me. That made me think, because we do use the language of war, don't we? And you do think, like, who do I want to be by my side? If bullets start flying and that example was an example of going, you'll be back at the nursing tent, still doing wonderful work.
Oh yeah.
But you will not be out here getting shot at because, you want to survive this war. And actually, to be fair to that person, I'm empathetic to it because we all fight in different ways. But yeah, there was when that happened, I was just like, really? And then I did a long podcast with Larry about Jezebels, and Lizzie credits you very much with having a very good Jezebel radar.
Wow.
And she says, Calvin, and there was one of the Jezebels was involved in that as well, I seem to remember. So the question then is, what if sports? You're not in sports, are you really?
Well, I'm a martial artist, so I've always done Taekwondo. I've got my black belt and my instructor's license in Taekwondo.
It's useful.
I would like to set up a club here, actually. Yeah, we've got a nice big church hall. If I get reinstalled or somehow become the parish priest here again, I plan to set up a Taekwondo club. I think
that'd be great. That'd be brilliant. Like, good news, Calv, you're back, and you'll be like,
oh yeah, it's great discipline. It really is, and I think everyone should have some self-defense skills.
church council this week. This week we practice 1-inch punch. Whee!
You don't have to do the accent though. You can just.
I'm culturally appropriating. Let me do it. It's my little bit of pushback.
It's my family sport. What's your sport?
Weirdly, and I'm not even proud to confess this, is Formula One.
Yeah.
I love motorsport because I just do. I've had loads of fast cars in my life and loads of fast motorbikes, and I like being dangerous. So all of those things help me. But Formula One, I was up this morning watching the whole race from start to finish, and it's not even that interesting. It's like, well, Norris has had a wonderful lap and he's clawed back 0.2 of a second. And I'm like, why am I watching this? But there's something compelling about motorsport for me. So
it's a TV
I love,
sport, isn't it? Because I went to Silverstone once and it looks like you don't see anything.
Yes, it is very much a TV sport. And it's, I suppose in the olden days, the allure of it was the fact that you could have Niki Lauda and James Hunt racing together. James Hunt's like drinking a bottle of champagne and smoking a few cigars before the race. And Niki Lauda's like, the geometry and the car must change or otherwise we are going to lose. It needs to happen now. So the personalities were involved. And then people would just like be decapitated and derailed at Senate. So I think that was, and Ralph Ratzenberger, who everyone forgets from that race. But, there was something about it. Now it's very, very safe. Motorsport. So, and Lewis had listening to that petulant little toad, Lewis Hamilton, this morning on talking to his Ferrari garage, because you've got an engineer, and also I love the teamwork aspect of motorsport, where they turn around and go, you need to push now, Lewis, push. Or that's what would happen in the olden days. But in his new Ferrari team, she's gone to Ferrari, they're like, you need maybe to put the setting on a B1 when you're close enough. And he's like, shut up. I know what I'm doing. Leave me alone. I want it. And I was like, you are such a petulant little toad. I've never understood the Lewis Hamilton phenomenon. Anyway, that's sport for you. History. Father Calvin Robinson.
Yeah. My favorite
period in history.
Period in history, as in to study, is the Renaissance. I'm a big fan of that period. Like the Medici family, having these patrons that realize that society is worth fighting for and protecting. And instead of making money to make money or to be rich or whatever, that might be one of their motivations, but they patron the arts, and they, all the greatest art that we have in the world today is from that period of history when people literally just funded artists and writers, scribes to translate ancient art, ancient literature from Greece and Rome. And it's just, and people still believed in Christ. Like the church was what people lived by. And of course, no one did it perfectly because we're all still fallen sinners, but it was just, there's something magnificent about that period in history. And I think that was pretty much probably the peak.
Well, it's interesting because I 100% agree with you. The great steps that we take forward as mankind are done via altruistic patronage. So my friend Geoffrey de Medici.
He is a bit like a Medici.
He is. He's always thinking like, there's a very strong sense of fairness as well about the whole thing. Geoffrey de Medici. So that's interesting. Yeah. My favorite period in history is, there's two. One is the mid-Tudor crisis, because I studied it at length. Wow. And, I was just fascinated to see how Henry VIII managed to mess things up so badly just for the sake of his own dick. And I just thought that was insane. And then my other favorite period of history is the history that none of us ever get taught, which is like what happened before Harold Hardrada. What happened in the so-called Dark Ages when you look at things like the pyramids and the Sphinx and these satellite images they're now coming out with of Angkor Wat and places like that, and as Sigiriya in Sri Lanka, and these very, very advanced societies, which we just sort of look back on in our modern petulant way as like, whatever, So I would love to know more about I think history is a great thing for everyone to get interested in. Actually, I think it's a fabulous thing. But the Renaissance. Yeah, you're very attached to Rome. I walked past the Villa de Medici when we were.
Well,
in
they were
Rome.
in Florence mostly, weren't they? But I am attached to Rome, absolutely.
Yeah.
For instance.
We walked right up those Spanish steps, and then we got to the top of the Spanish steps, and then we turned left and walked down into one of the uglier piazzas. But there was a big thing saying Villa de Medici, and it was huge. It went on forever. I was like, Geoffrey de Medici could probably be sat in there having a glass of Chardonnay as we speak.
But I do like that period you mentioned of Henry VIII, and I love studying the Reformation. Not that I'm a fan of the Reformation, but I love that period of history because obviously it's very relevant to where the church is and where we find ourselves in society. That massive split away from the church has resulted in so much of what we have today, or what we don't have today. And I think you're slightly unfair on him. I don't think he was necessarily thinking with his appendages. I think he was trying to find an heir. He knew that he had to have an heir, and he wasn't being very successful in that. And
he nicked his brother's wife, which you
repented of. And he was a staunch Catholic. He was very good at defending the faith, which is why he got the title Defender of the Faith. And he argued very well against Martin Luther, who the church called a heretic. Unfortunately, he did split from the authority of Rome, and the rest is history. But had the Pope been more amenable, which the Pope could have been, if politics weren't involved, and the relationship with Charlemagne and Catherine of Oregon and all of that was definitely had a part to play in not getting an annulment.
But where are all the monasteries? Oh, that's right. They're just...
Well, that's a separate thing. That's another thing because they were falling anyway. But what he did was abhorrent. Absolutely, he was monstrous in his actions. But that was happening anyway. That wasn't necessarily due to everything else. But we wouldn't have that. We wouldn't have our purple-haired lady priestess if it wasn't for him. So he does take some front of.
And isn't she wonderful? No, she is wonderful. She matters. Yeah, they all do.
Everyone matters. They're doing the right thing. But
Ellie Burgess.
Any what?
Loved Ellie Burgess. Eli Burgess. Eli. I don't know. I can't read it. Love to hear your take on Christian forgiveness.
I feel like we've done this one.
We've done that one.
But
hi team from pseudo_nim. Please discuss what it means to be human and humane. Cheers. So I suppose the question there is the human is the immutable and humane is the practice. So the minute I hear the word humane, I think of secularist, non-believing, man-based value systems. What do you hear?
Humane, I feel something in line with natural law. So when something's inhumane, it's immoral in some way, isn't it? It's beneath our station as people, because there used to be an understanding that humans are above other creatures in terms of like animals, and now in modernity we see animals above humans quite often. It's these people who are pro-abortion or call themselves pro-choice would rather save an animal than a baby quite often. But it used to be understood the other way around.
I'd love to see the Venn diagram of members of PETA and pro-choice movement. I imagine that's not even a Venn diagram; it's just a big circle.
Yeah, but to be human is to be made in the image of God, and to be made in the image of God means to be filled with His divine will. And that's our purpose. As though our whole life is to praying through the Lord's Prayer, "Thy will be done," is to empty ourselves of our own will, just as Christ did in His kenosis, empty ourselves of our own selfish ambitions to be filled with God's will for us, because that is true freedom. And our journey from birth to death is trying to accomplish that.
I love the fact that it also gives you so many get outs to go, look, just trust in me and everything will be right.
Yeah.
Which is essentially the overwhelming message. Yeah, and that's even Old Testament message as well. I think I told you last week, before I turned off social media, I started following a lot of Bible social media stuff. And it's actually really nice. I can recommend that people do that just to break up your timeline between people shouting about whatever they're shouting about today with a prayer or a verse or just something. Yeah, I've got it on Instagram. My Instagram algorithm has worked me out completely. It's either like, very bad car accidents or psalms. So wow. Twitter's now kind of worked me out. Okay. So I would say that humane. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're all humans and each of us matter, and we're all sacred and we're all, that we are touched by the divine. We're created by the divine. I was sitting down and having a chat with my stepson, and he said, he was telling me about a book, and he said, I said, what do you like about the book? And he went, I really like evolution of, not Tamagotchis. What are they called? Those things that
Pokemon.
Kids like. Pokemon. They evolve. And I said, well, do they evolve? Or I said, I know, you're right, metamorphosis. He says, I really like metamorphosis. And I was like, wow, you're way too smart for me. So
that's cool.
I'm trying to, if I was online, I'd go back to Twitter. But bless him. Yeah. So I would say humane is, it's the basic, again, back to that idea that the truth is very simple, that being humane is very simple. You can spot inhumanity very, very quickly and very, very easy. Cancel culture is very inhumane, for example. I would say in a modern world where we're not worried about our church being dragged to our church in Democratic Republic of Congo and being beheaded, we are, humane is to treat people, to love thy neighbor as thyself, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
In a way, I think.
And on that note, I just feel like I was a bit dismissive of Ellie Burgess on forgiveness. I think we've done a podcast on it if you want to go into further detail, but just to briefly say, the whole point of Christian forgiveness is to release ourselves of that burden. Because when we are holding on to negativity, bitterness, resentment, it affects our soul more than it affects the person we're angry with. And so we release ourselves from it, and we forgive the person for our own good as much as their good. And because we know that God ultimately forgives us too. And so if he can forgive us and we are unworthy, we can forgive other people too. And that doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean you have to go and trust the person again, but it certainly means you don't hold on to that negative energy, really.
Which is very simple. Another very, very simple concept, which is forgiveness doesn't belong to you, it belongs to God.
Yeah.
And if we're all equal, and we're all equal in that way, rather than equal in like everyone's a millionaire, but if we're all equal in that way, then everyone deserves forgiveness. And as you say, that you don't need to caveat it with like going around and having Sunday lunch with them every 5 minutes, but it's heavy to hold resentment. And, all of us learn that our hard way, I think, because you live with it for long enough and it just burns you up. So why feel that way? So that's actually very good. And you were very concise there. Okay. A Little Things Co. At A Little Things Co. A suggestion could be to explore how the pursuit of beauty in art, whether through architecture, music, painting, or literature, can serve as an expression of devotion to glorify God. It was very biblical this week. Much character and beauty seem to have been lost in modern art and architecture. Is this decline linked to the lack of faith in our contemporary age? Very good question, actually. Yeah. I'm going to go first on this one.
Go for it.
I think that most modern architecture is deliberately designed to hate God. So even down to the council houses built in socialist revenge Britain post-war, you see how small the windows are. And I know that we were living during a time when heat was expensive, and I get it. I understand. But, in Georgian Britain, people would be dying from, outbreaks of cholera at the local well. So relatively speaking, people were in a much better place post-war. And you look at those reams of vile 1940s and 1950s housing in Britain. And then you look at some of the architecture that, you look at places like National Theatre, which is just a disgusting monstrosity, like a concrete monstrosity on the front of the Thames next to Waterloo Bridge. And it's just all disgusting and vile. And it doesn't fill me with any hope at all or any, St. Paul's, you go, oh, look at that. And, you know, even the Pantheon in Rome, when we sat having, you know, you look at the Pantheon, you're like, that's not an easy thing to build, was it? It's the biggest rotunda on earth, but, you know, the National Theatre is just a bit of slabby, concretey crap. I think it's a reflection on how little faith we have in ourselves. How little faith we have in God and how much faith we have in ourselves. The worse the architecture, the more people believe in themselves as a solution to a problem. What do you reckon?
I entirely agree, but ironically, I think it's a good proof of God, because just in the way that everything beautiful is proof of God, everything ugly is also proof in a way, because the darkness provides a way to highlight the lightness. And we're living in a time where there is such ugliness, and it's very purposeful, it's very intentional, that people realize that this can't be true, this can't be good, and it's not. And therefore they know there's something better, because the whole point of truth, beauty, and goodness, which I think she outlines, which are of course the transcendentals, is that they lift us up out of ourselves, lift us out of the secular towards the divine. They lift us out of ourselves towards God. They remind us of God. They point us, direct us directly towards God. And so in a time where everything is beautiful, it's easy to see God. And this is why the enemy doesn't want everything to be beautiful. This is why the enemy wants everything to be ugly. And this is why modern architecture is all ugly, because people are designing it on purpose to, as you pointed out, to reflect themselves rather than to reflect God. It's all about the architect, the designer. It's their legacy. Whereas it used to be about, you know, I won't see the end of this cathedral that I've designed, but I hope that it glorifies God in some way. Massive difference, massive chasm. So beauty isn't the same anymore. Truth, we know, is not the same. They're twisting the truth every step of the way. And this is the work of the enemy again, that men can become women, boys can become girls. We know that to be untrue, but we're told it is true. And we're told that we have to stick to that lie. Otherwise, we're not good people, which brings us to goodness. Good is no longer good. Evil is now good. The opposite of good is good. And that's what virtue signaling is all about. It's like, I don't have to be good. I don't have to do the work to be good. I can just say I'm a good person and live an evil, wicked life and be disconnected from God. So truth, beauty, and goodness are the things that lead us towards God. When we go in the opposite direction, we're led away from God. So ugliness, lies, and evil are the work of the enemy. And so wherever we see that in society, we see the work of the enemy, and we should run in the opposite direction.
Yeah, I have nothing to add to that. That's about as concise a description as you've just said what I wanted to say, but better. So thanks a lot, Calv.
Cheers.
Right. Okay. Right. This one's for you. Sonia Decline Sonia, at Sonia Decline Sonia. Please speak about what his plans are, where he is. Is he planning to settle in the USA? I think he could travel all over the USA doing Christians or Catholic spiritual events, retreats for a fee. I would love to attend one of them. She wants your diary, Calv. Sonia wants to see you.
Thanks, Sonia. The best way to see where I'm going to be is to follow me on the socials. I usually put it out there, probably on Instagram or Facebook. X is more hostile. What my plan? I have no plans. As I always say, I'm looking for the door that God is opening, and I'm going to walk through it. I believe he called me here to Grand Rapids. I believe he called me here to St. Paul's. And so I'm hoping that there'll be a way to work through that. Don't know what it will look like, but I'm praying through that situation and discerning at the moment. I'm pretty confident that I'll remain in Grand Rapids for the foreseeable. My visa expires at the end of 2027. So unless it's renewed by then, that's probably when I'll be returning to the UK. Who knows? I think it's sometimes a good thing to plan, but I find it in my life to be a fool's errand, because God always has something else in store for me. I didn't in a million years think I'd be here 5 years ago. Yeah. So I have no idea where I'll be in another 5 years.
Yeah. Also, what's the old line? God laughs as man plans, or something like that. So, you never know, 2027, maybe, when I have a feeling. I was listening to a really interesting man. And actually it's one of the few times I will listen to two perspectives on the same issue argued by two completely different people from different political, arenas. And both of them are experts in civil war. And I'd have to dig around to, let me have a quick dig. But they both basically they're both saying that there's this thing called an anocracy, which is, when a democracy becomes authoritarian. Okay. So the guy who is worth listening to is called David Betts. he is a more conservative leading Canadian, but naturalized British citizen. And he's talking about the end of, the growing possibilities of civil war happening in the UK.
Years of crushing.
And the woman is Barbara F. Walter. And she argues from completely the democratic sort of left-leaning stance, but they both agree very much that Britain is headed towards civil war. Particularly Britain is headed towards civil war, and it will happen within the next 2 or 3 years. So you never know. 2027 may be the time when you're called back, but it's right.
Come back and pick up our sword.
We're on to the last question now, Calvo.
Okay.
Hang on, you just texted me something.
No, that was a while ago. That's a link to something else for later.
Oh, right. Okay. Rita, G6. Being as you're due to marry soon, Laurence, will you stay in your home country? It's so depressing to witness so many good people up and leaving. I just wish people would just persevere, stay and fight. That's a good question. Never, until I had my little Twitter hiatus. Calvin's obviously answer is in the fact that he's 4,500 miles away from me right now. Until I had my Twitter hiatus, we've talked very, very seriously about not living in the UK anymore. And certainly if you listen to the David Betts guy who I was referring to earlier, he says there's nothing you can do about it. The enemy is way past the gates and the city is being sacked. So that's his view. And I tend to agree with him. But I think one of the hopes that he offered out was he said that as the Civil War begins to ruminate, you will find big disparities between rural communities and urban communities. Because, as we've discussed before, lots of bad ideas are born in cities because cities are horrible places to live. They're expensive. They stink. They, and I don't live in that. And Lizzie and I woke up this morning and you literally from our bed, you can see about, a mile and a bit down to the sea. It's just a gentle slope down to the sea. And it's just, both of us every single day just go, aren't we so blessed to see this? So I don't want to leave this green and pleasant land. And I do want to fight for it, but it's how you fight for it, which essentially is what this period for me, this reflective period for me is about. Because I don't want to slag off Nigel Farage too much. I don't want to get too involved in, will you share this article from the Telegraph? I don't care. I want to think about what it is that we're trying to preserve. And to understand your cultural heritage, I'm steeped in it because I was raised in it, and you were to a degree as well. But I was raised in the very specific part of it, which was culture and art. And my contribution has to be somewhere in that area. It's not really like standing on the green benches and pissing off a conservative. It's just not what I'm born to do, or a Labour person. So I would stay and fight, but would I fight? The only thing would I, if someone said, right, we've started up the 3rd Battalion Essex Guards, will you go and, take East London back? I'd be like, no. Not unless we can sack the mosques. At the end of the day, but I always found it really shocking that people would say, that, the Irish are burning down the mosques. I'm like, well, of course they are. They're Catholics.
Yeah.
It's like, if you go to a Middle Eastern country, they burn down the churches. That's what they do. It's like, that's how
they've realized it. They've realized
don't endorse that, by the way, YouTube. Thank you. I'm not promoting it, but I'm just saying I'm always surprised when they go, oh, and then someone got very upset and tried to burn down a mosque. And I'm like, well, go to Saudi Arabia and take me to the local parish church. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, we don't burn mosques, but I understand what you're saying. But they've realized now that Islam is the enemy. The problem I'm not disparaging Rita, I don't know Rita, but most people who say, oh, why don't you stay and fight, are not the ones fighting. That's the problem I have. If people pointed me to the battlefield and said, this is where the fight is, then I'd be able to understand. But most of the people who say, oh, we should stay in your country and fight, are not fighting in any way, shape or form. Usually they're anonymous avatar, anonymous name. They don't stick their name to their opinions. They're not out there saying anything. They're not sticking their head above the parapet. They want other people to fight for them and potentially be martyred for them. And I think that's, honestly, I find that quite cowardly. I love my country. But I'd love to see people fighting for it. And I don't see that. And I think this actually could take generations. It could take 3-4 generations. Who knows how long it might take? Why should someone live a miserable life in a place that has become horrible in order to please other people? Like, if there's no fight going on, there's no way to win, but it makes XYZ on Twitter feel happy that you're living there in the misery, potentially getting arrested or killed. Why would you do that? If we've got no way of changing the country. Yeah. We have no First Amendment, so we have no free speech. We have no Second Amendment, so we have no self-defense. All that happens when people try to fight in the UK is look at what's happening with Tommy Robinson. Look at what happened with Bernie Sporoff. People are getting arrested for silent prayer, for tweeting, for Facebook posts, for going to events or running events. Now, anyone that tries to do anything decent is getting arrested. And the Mohammedans are killing people, and there are no consequences for that. They're raping people, no consequences for that. There's a two-tiered system, but there is no fight. Show me the fight. I'd love to see it, but there isn't one. So until there is one, I think people need to be less critical of other people for getting out of the misery. I understand that misery likes company. I get that entirely. But unless you're going to do something, don't point your finger at other people. Those of us who've tried for years to fight it takes a lot of sacrifice, and no good comes from it. And so people have to join the fight or lead the fight, but they cannot expect other people to fight for them.
I think good does come from it. I think people follow your example. So I agree with you with your idea that we've got to define what the fight is. It's very difficult to fight something where no one has defined what the fight is. But I think that people take great courage and great heart, and the people that tend to stop me or try and engage me in serious conversation are always like, thank you for doing that.
Which is great, but the country is still lost. Everyone's still miserable.
Well, hence why in true British tradition, things just have to get worse and worse and worse, and then which they will, and because that's inevitable, and things will get better.
And I know you don't do it for the praise, neither do I. But the praise is nice, but the praise doesn't add up to change. Change is what we want. I don't see any change in our country. And
I do. I really do. I think it's going to be fascinating to see what happens when Tommy gets released from prison if they don't manage to murder him first, the British government.
Well, he'll be a changed man. He'll be scarred from this. This is traumatic, what he's been put through.
Yeah, but he's also, I also think that, this sort of hated pariah figure for the establishment is actually yet to serve his greatest purpose, and I really do. And that's not me, Tommy Robinson fanboying. That's me saying that man has been persecuted in ways that we haven't yet.
I agree with you. I love Tommy, but I just don't think we pin all our hopes on one man. We need a move.
But we're not. Well, I don't think he pins his hopes on one. I agree. I agree. It'll get worse. And then it'll get steadily worse. And then at some point, the British will just go, enough. And, we are hitting the very sweet spot of it. You've got Squid Game guy in charge of Ofsted. You've got Banis Fazi in charge of Justice. You've got Sadiq Khan in charge of London. You've got Mohammedans everywhere in this country.
Liberals are still defending it. We were pointing out that we need to be running the education system, and everyone's like, oh, yeah, but isn't it so diverse? Even people who think they're on our side.
But look what we also have to learn history, because look what Hitler did. Hitler knew that Marxism was the problem. He understood that Marxism was a major problem. Where he went really wrong was he then decided to put the whole thing onto Jews. But his understanding of Marxism was actually pretty good, but his lunacy and ranting. I'd been listening to Mein Kampf as well being read, because I'm kind of interested to know what. And he's a sort of strange man. Hitler obviously is, time proved, and despicable in every single possible way. But he was sort of going down the path of Marxism, and then he does this weird left turn onto Jewry. And it's strange, because you think actually a lot of what he was saying sounds now the sort of thing that you'd hear from a progressive wokist. And I find that really, really unsettling. And it's all really weird. I've got to run, brother. And also, we've done 1 hour, 20 minutes. This is way too long for us.
Okay, let's wrap up.
I love you.
Just as I was saying,
for us.
The boomers ruined it. The Gen X were apathetic. Millennials did nothing. The Zoomers are starting to turn it around. I reckon 2 more generations before we get anywhere. So don't.
Cheer up, bastard. I reckon 2 more years and then we'll be there.
Please, let us pray. Almighty God, who seest that we have no power of ourselves to help ourselves, keep us both outwardly in our bodies and inwardly in our souls, that we may be defended from all adversaries which may happen to the body, and from all evil thoughts which may assault and hurt the soul. Through Jesus Christ, thy Son, our Lord, who liveth and reigneth with thee in the unity of the Holy Spirit, ever one God, world without end. Amen.
Amen. I love world without end. Love you, dude.
Love you too, brother. See you soon.
Speak to you. We'll have a proper non-online conversation this week, probably, about our wedding service, which will be quite fun.
Yeah, that'll be good.
I love you, man. Have a good day.
Yeah. Bye-bye.